Guantanamo has been synonymous with torture for literally my entire adult life. It was January 11th, 2002, the day after my 21st birthday, when the first suspected terrorists were brought, in hoods and shackles and orange jumpsuits, to the American Navy base on the southeastern tip of Cuba. The men were kept in outdoor cages with 2 buckets, one for drinking water and one to defecate in, while a makeshift prison was built around them. The prison was meant to be a temporary solution. I'm now 40, and the prison is still there. Most of the prisoners aren't. Some died, supposedly by suicide. Others went to court and won their freedom. The vast majority of them were simply released unceremoniously, deemed to no longer be a threat. About 500 men during the later years of the Bush administration, and another 200 during the Obama administration. Of the 780 men once detained at Guantanamo, 40 remain. But the prison still stands, a monument to America's willingness, even eagerness, to sacrifice human rights and the rule of law in our war on terror. The prison has weathered hurricanes. It's withstood withering criticism from human rights advocates since the day that it opened. It's outlasted the 2-term presidency of a man who issued an executive order to close it on his first day in office. It's absurdly expensive, costing $13 million a year for each man detained there. And it's wildly ineffective, with 0 successful criminal prosecutions, nothing resembling justice for the victims of terrorism and their families. It's a recruitment poster for our enemies and a middle finger to our allies. And yet still, somehow, it's there. Why? How? I believe there are 3 problems at the root of Guantanamo's continued existence. Before I get into them, let me say that I don't think they can be undone by politicians alone. For Guantanamo to finally end, we will need a national reckoning. One brilliant human rights lawyer I know says that a national reckoning is a personal reckoning that goes viral. In other words, a ripple effect. That's what we'll need in order to solve the 3 problems at the root of Guantanamo. First of those problems is dehumanization. Do we see the people we detain in Guantanamo as people? If you've paid attention to media coverage of Guantanamo, these are some of the images you might have seen. What's missing from all of these pictures are faces. Whether you see these men as villains or victims or both, you don't actually see them. In the few cases where pictures of detainees' faces have been published, they're pictures like these. Images of men who had the humanity drained out of them, intentionally. Men who were, through no choice of their own, wearing clothes and facial hair that othered them. These 2 men are Lakhdar Boumediene and Mustafa Ait Hidir. Before I became a high school history teacher, I used to work at the law firm that took their case to the Supreme Court and established their innocence. Although I didn't work on their case myself, I had the opportunity to get to know them after they won their freedom. I got to spend time with them and their families. Here are a few more recent pictures of them. Images like these probably don't leap to most Americans' minds when they hear the word Guantanamo. If they did, maybe there wouldn't still be a Guantanamo. Lakhdar and Mustafa wrote a book about their lives, which I had the privilege of working with them on. Their hope was that it would help Americans come to see the people underneath the hoods and orange jumpsuits as actual people. People with full lives and families that they were ripped apart from. There are other opportunities to witness the humanity of the men beneath the hoods. Some detainees painted while they were in Guantanamo. The John Jay College of Criminal Justice put on a remarkable exhibit called Ode to the Sea, featuring artwork that lawyers brought back after visiting their clients. I would encourage you to read everything that the curator of that exhibit, Aaron Thompson, has written about Guantanamo and the humanity of the men detained there. One of the men, Abd al-Malik, who was released in 2016, sells his paintings on a website. I'm proud to have 4 of his paintings hanging in the library at the school where I teach. Also, just this month, a movie called The Mauritanian came out. In it, you get to see former detainee Mohamedou Ould Salahi portrayed as a person in full. You can also read his book, Guantanamo Diary. His gentle, wry sense of humor jumps off the page. Like my friends Lakhdar and Mustafa, Mohamedou's ability to overcome, to transcend his ordeal, is astonishing and inspiring. That these men weren't broken by what they went through, that they are kind, loving, funny, friendly family men, is a remarkable testament to the strength of the human spirit. At the same time, I think it's important that we don't fall into the trap of turning these stories into resilience porn. We run the risk of letting ourselves off the hook for what they went through, what we put them through. Sure, they survived it. And yes, it's inspiring. But they never should have had to. How could we have let it happen? And that brings me to the second reason, after dehumanization, that Guantanamo is still open. Deflection. In the same way that we don't look under the hoods, we don't look in the mirror. No one thinks the horrors of Guantanamo are their fault. If you were to try to design in a lab a setup that would make it easy for people to deny personal responsibility, you'd come up with something a lot like Guantanamo. This is true of the torture that happened within Guantanamo. The lawyers who wrote memos justifying torture, the higher-ups who sanctioned it, they weren't the ones who carried it out. They could always claim that guards were going beyond the scope of what was authorized. And the guards could always claim that they were just doing what they'd been ordered to do. For that matter, the guards all put black tape over their name tags. They were ordered to. This meant that detainees couldn't identify anybody who abused them. At a certain point, I wonder if it also made the guards stop thinking of themselves as individuals who were making their own decisions, taking their own actions. It's not me beating a defenseless man senseless while his hands are cuffed behind him. It's some guy in a uniform who doesn't even have a name. There's also a deflection of personal responsibility when it comes to the faulty decisions that led to innocent men being imprisoned. The guards assumed that everyone in Guantanamo was a terrorist, the worst of the worst. And why wouldn't they? Someone who they trusted told them that. Of course, the person who told them that would say that he was relying on someone else, who would say that he was relying on someone else, who would say that he was relying on someone else. Turtles all the way down. Since I started working on Lakhdar and Mustafa's book a decade ago, I've been trying to find someone, anyone, who will take responsibility for making the decision to imprison them. I actually had the chance to speak with the intelligence analyst who first recommended that they be brought in for questioning. He told me he was suspicious of them because they were Algerians living in Sarajevo, and they'd had a conversation with another Algerian living in Sarajevo, and that other Algerian had raised some red flags. And the analyst, of course, didn't think that that was a sufficient reason to lock them up. He just wanted to bring them in Sarajevo, for questioning. When he later learned that they'd been taken to Guantanamo, he figured, well, something must have come up in the questioning. But he told me when he was posted to Guantanamo a few years later, the director of the Joint Intelligence Group at Guantanamo pulled him aside and said, You recommended bringing these guys in. So question for you. What are they doing here? There was no intelligence to support detaining them. Everyone thought that someone else had made the decision. Maybe everyone was right. The system was carefully designed so that decisions could be made without anyone actually being the one who made them. More broadly, there's deflection of personal responsibility with regard to the simple fact that Guantanamo exists. I mean, I'd like to think that Guantanamo isn't my fault. I didn't vote for the president who greenlit that prison, and I've opposed it for literally my entire adult life. I also helped pay for it. I helped pay the salaries of the politicians who planned it, the lawyers who okayed it, the construction workers who built it, and the soldiers who maintain it. As an American citizen, I'm one of the people this prison was supposedly built to protect. As an American taxpayer, I'm one of the people who built it. Does that make me a bad person? I hope not. But I do think it means that I bear some responsibility to be part of the solution. And I think we all do. Of course, that's hard. Which leads to the third reason Guantanamo still exists: dehumanization, deflection, and finally, distraction. There are just so many things going on, so many problems that need fixing, so many things pinging at us, poking us, so many directions we're being pulled in, and it's all exhausting. And honestly, who wants to think about something like Guantanamo? On Twitter, I follow several members of a group that describe themselves as the Gitmo Bar, lawyers who have devoted much of their lives to representing men in Guantanamo. Lawyers like Alka Pradhan and Shelby Sullivan Bennis. These lawyers are nothing short of American heroes. The Constitution means something because they say it does, and they put in the work to make it so. A number of times, I've seen members of the Gitmo Bar tweet about horrors that they've observed. And then they add sheepishly something along the lines of, "I'm sorry to be such a downer. This is why you can't take me to dinner parties." As though they should feel contrite for talking about Guantanamo, rather than the rest of us feeling contrite for not talking about it, for looking away, for wanting to be distracted. Sometimes I think we're so desperate to stay distracted that we turn to derision. After Lochdar's book was published, he was interviewed by the website Mother Jones. Mother Jones tweeted out a link to the interview alongside Lochdar's quote, "I want Americans to know that Guantanamo happened not to monsters, but to men." I'll never forget this response from someone identifying themselves as Barb Ann PA. "Who effing cares?" she asks. Here's the thing. I actually think that Barb Ann, whoever she actually is, would care if she truly paid attention. Deep down, I think she knows it. Otherwise, why tweet anything at all? She pretends not to care, because caring is hard and cynicism is safe. At least, that's what some people think. When I first learned that I was going to be speaking at this conference, I Googled TEDxQueensU, curious to see what would come up. This Facebook post was one of the first things that I saw. TEDx ideas are rarely worth spreading, the commenter writes. I bet he gave himself a good high five after typing that gem. Sick burn, bro. I drafted lots of snarky replies, and I deleted all of them. And I told myself, I shouldn't care what this guy thinks. But I do. I will never not be enraged by this too cool for school attitude, this mindset that says, if I just pretend nothing matters, then I don't have to worry about anything. If I don't have to worry about anything, I don't have to do anything. We dehumanize and deflect and distract and deride, because otherwise we have to effing care. And that's effing hard. And that's where the theme of this conference comes in, the ripple effect. Can you convince one other person to fight the urge to dehumanize and deflect and distract and deride? Can you convince one other person to look at the human under the hood, to look in the mirror, to not look away, to bear witness, to effing care? And then can they do the same?